problema. Analisi correggi? No. Social coding? This is fine. Okay.
Yeah.
1, 2. Okay. Yeah. It's fine.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mi ha detto che ha bisogno di più luce, allora ho acceso
Ok.
anche
Va bene, va bene.
non so perché.
Va. Ma tutta sta roba, com'è? È finita così male? Tutta sta roba. Ah, you haven't? Ah, good. Excuse me.
I'm not Philip Book.
No. I have not realized that it was because I see you around here and I imagined that it was yours. No. Okay. Fine.
Questo lo sposto, se no fa
Sì, va bene.
segnale, lo metto qua sulla sigla.
Perfetto. Okay. It's time for starting the second session of this morning after the coffee break. So it's a great pleasure to introduce João Carlos Major.
Major.
I apologize. My Portuguese is very poor or absent.
Oh,
It's absent. Please. It's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah.
You want to listen to me? Okay, thank you. Just that. Please, let me present some preliminary thoughts before jumping to my text. In the realm of analytical psychology, three main schools have appeared. The classical or Zurich school, which centers on Carl Jung's original concepts. The school of development, which melds aspects of relational human development throughout life with Jungian ideas. And the archetypal school, which diverges from traditional Jungian psychology by focusing less on individuation, that is, the integration of the natural splitted mind, and more on the pluralistic nature of the mind. These three perspectives, while available, appear to be incomplete in capturing the full breadth of Jung's integrative vision. It is in this context that we propose today a fourth school, the School of Codes, a fresh approach that seeks to synthesize the richness of these traditions on a renewed and forward-thinking foundation. But first, we must declare a monist vision in the conceptualization of the mind. In John Searle's way, the mind is the name for the functioning of the nervous system. Of course, in a body, and a body in a context. So, mind is a relational entity, like the classic concept of person, the theological or religious one. Person means a relational entity. Mind is not a thing. That introduces the possibility of future persons based on artificial intelligence. They will be, as well, persons because of that relational capability. Second, we declare the mechanistic vision of Marcello Barbieri, because a machine is only a machine when all the parts are interconnected, not when they are divided. Like John Searle said, we can't anymore use the terminology of the 17th century in our days. And doing so, we resolve the mind-body dualism. So, if we consider that archetypes are encoded in neuronal patterns, we can see them as a specific type of relational or biological codes, aligning with Marcello Barbieri's vision. Both concepts underscore the profound significance of universal and innate patterns that shape life and behavior, thereby highlighting the crucial intersection between biology and psychology in understanding of human nature. In fact, we need to embrace the concept of human nature again. The concept of human nature can and should be revived in contemporary psychology. This does not mean that we are a blind plaything of biological forces, but rather that without careful observation of them, we will be a blind plaything in their hands. Without that, we cannot develop true epigenetic landscapes or becoming the real masters of our future evolution. So, the mind is not limited to the brain function. It refers to the functioning of the brain in relation to its body, and the body acting within a physical and social context. According to this relational paradigm, the mind transcends the biological membrane, which is the skin. But this does not bring us any closer to some kind of anti-scientific dualism, but to the relational paradigm. Integrating the ideas of Jung and Barbieri, we can see the collective unconscious archetypes as forms of biological codes that operate on both the neural and symbolic levels. This offers an integrative view of the interaction between biology, sociology, and psychology, suggesting that universal emotional and behavioral patterns have a biological basis encoded in neuronal processes, which are activated in social contexts and lead to specific forms of psychological processing. This is a biosocial psychological approach. Such a perspective can enrich our understanding of human nature by revealing the interconnection of these factors in shaping human behavior and perception. Now I jump to my paper. When I finish the time, please shut me down. Thank you. Understanding how the human brain constructs and interprets the world is one of the central challenges in cognitive neuroscience. The cerebral cortex is at the heart of this quest. A critical brain region responsible for many complex functions, including perception, memory, and decision-making. The cortex serves as a model builder, an archetype maker, translating the flood of sensory information into coherent mental representations that guide behavior and thought. Perception and memory are deeply interconnected processes within the cortex. Perception is not a simple reflection of the external world, but a sophisticated interpretation shaped by prior knowledge and experiences stored in memory. This dynamic interplay enables the brain to derive meaning from incomplete, noisy, and ambiguous sensory data through inferences and abstractions. Instances of visual associative agnosia, where individuals cannot associate a percept with its meaning despite having normal vision, highlight the crucial role of memory in perception. Not all cognitive processes are emergent properties, arising solely from experience. Some are a priori, hardwired into our neural architecture, as suggested by Carl Jung's theory of archetypes and supported by contemporary code biology. This field explores how biological codes and hardwired structures influence cognitive processes, offering a framework for understanding innate aspects of mental functions. Jean Piaget introduces the concept of mental schemas. Schemas are cognitive structures that help individuals organize and interpret information. Piaget described how these schemas develop and adapt, allowing individuals to assimilate new experiences and accommodate new information within their existing mental frameworks. This process of cognitive development is crucial for understanding how children and adults make sense of the world around them. Schemas help us understand how the brain organizes past experiences and uses them to predict future events. They are essential for cognitive processes such as learning, memory, and problem solving. By structuring our knowledge of the world, schemas enables us to navigate complex environments and make informed decisions. While schemas and emergent cognitive processes are vital, they do not account for all aspects of mental function. Code biology introduces the concept that some cognitive processes are a priori, meaning they are hardwired into our neural architecture through evolution. This idea resonates with Carl Jung's theory of archetypes, which posits that certain universal symbols and motifs are embedded in human psyche. Code biology explores how these innate structures or phylogenetic memories influence our cognitive processes. These hardwired elements are thought to provide a foundational framework upon which more flexible, experience-based schemas are built. Understanding the interaction between these fixed and adaptable components of cognition is critical to comprehend the full spectrum of mental processes, and must be our future agenda. The cortex is central in integrating sensory inputs with existing mental models to generate coherent perceptions and guide behavior. Predictive coding is a framework that explains how the brain anticipates sensory inputs by generating predictions based on past experiences. When actual sensory information matches these predictions, perception is seamless. Discrepancies between predictions and sensory inputs trigger updates to our mental models, enhancing our understanding and adaptability. The cortex synthesizes emergent cognitive processes with innate hardwired structures by acting as a model builder and an archetype maker. This synthesis enables the brain to construct a nuanced representation of reality, facilitating accurate predictions and adequate decision-making in complex environments. Cortical processing of sensory information. The cortex is highly organized structure with different regions specialized for processing various types of sensory information. For instance, the primary visual cortex processes basic visual features, such as edges and colors. In contrast, higher-order visual areas integrate these features to form complex representations like faces and objects. This hierarchical processing allows the cortex to construct detailed and coherent visual perceptions from raw sensory data. Sensory information enters the cortex through a process known as bottom-up processing, where data from the sensory organs are relayed to the brain and progressively integrated at higher levels of cortical processing. However, perception relies not solely on this bottom-up input. It also involves top-down processing, where the brain uses prior knowledge and expectations to interpret incoming sensory data. This bidirectional flow of information enables the cortex to construct and refine mental models of the external world efficiently. Perception and memory are inherently intertwined processes within the cortex. Perception involves matching incoming sensory information with stored representations in memory, a process facilitated by the associative connections between different cortical regions. I skip some kind of raw information. Let me jump to neuronal codes. Neuronal codes are how sensory information is represented in the brain. These codes involve patterns of neuronal activity that correspond to specific stimuli or experiences. For instance, certain neurons in the visual cortex are selectively responsive to particular orientations of lines or movement, forming a neuronal representation of those features. The formation and utilization of these neuronal codes are crucial for constructing mental models. By encoding sensory information in a structured manner, the cortex can generate predictions and update its models based on new experiences. This predictive coding framework suggests that perception involves continuously comparing incoming sensory data with internal predictions and adjusting the mental models accordingly. Carl Jung proposed archetypes, innate universal symbols and motifs embedded in the human psyche. These archetypes provide a foundational framework for understanding and interpreting experiences, In cognitive neuroscience, archetypes are hardwired structures that shape our mental models. For example, the concept of a mother is an archetype that exists across cultures and individuals. This archetype influences how we perceive and interact with maternal figures. By having these universal templates, the brain can efficiently process and categorize complex social and environmental information. Archetypes also shape our expectations and predictions. They provide a set of default assumptions that the brain uses to interpret sensory data and generate predictions about future events. This predictive capability is crucial for navigating a complex and ever-changing world. Predictive coding is a framework that explains how the brain anticipates sensory inputs by generating predictions based on past experiences and stored representations. This process involves a continuous feedback loop between different cortical areas. Lower-level sensory areas send predictions up the hierarchy, while higher-level areas send error signals down the hierarchy when there is a mismatch. Interplay ensures that the brain models are continuously refined and adapted to the current environment. The cortex's ability to act as both a model builder and an archetype maker relies on synthesizing emergent cognitive processes and innate hardwired structures. Emergent processes, such as learning and memory, allow the brain to adapt and refine its models based on experience. Innate structures, such as archetypes and phylogenetic memories, provide a foundational framework that guides these processes. This synthesis is evident in various cognitive functions, from essential perception to complex decision-making. For instance, when encountering a new object, the brain uses prior experiences or emergent processes and innate templates or archetypes to identify and categorize it. This dual approach ensures that our mental models are flexible and grounded in fundamental cognitive structures. Empirical evidence from various neuroscientific studies supports the theoretical framework of the cortex as a model builder and archetype maker. Examining the studies can better make us understand how the cortex constructs and updates mental representations. Neuronal coding is fundamental in understanding how the brain represents sensory information. Studies have shown that specific patterns of neuronal activity correspond to particular sensory inputs. Okay, let me skip this particular data to jump to the final remarks. A complex interplay. I'm time. Thank you, sir. Thank you. A complex interplay between sensory processing, memory, and predictive coding underpins the context's ability to construct and update mental models. Theoretical perspectives from Aristotle's early ideas to Piaget's schemas and Jung's archetypes provide a foundational understanding of how the brain organizes and interprets information. Empirical studies such as those of neuronal codes and visual associative agnosia, offers concrete evidence of the neuronal mechanisms involved in these processes. One of the key insights from this synthesis is the dynamic nature of perception and memory. Perception is not a passive reception of sensory inputs, but an active process of interpretation and prediction. The brain constantly compares incoming data with stored representations, updating its models to maintain an accurate and coherent understanding of the world. Memory, in turn, is integral to this process, providing the contextual knowledge necessary to meaningful perception. The cortex role in model building and archetype formation has several important implications for our understanding of cognitive processes. Integration of sensory and memory systems. The interplay between perception and memory highlights the interconnectedness of the systems. Understanding how the cortex integrates sensory inputs with stored knowledge can provide insights into various cognitive functions, from basic perception to complex decision-making. Second, predictive coding and efficiency. The predictive coding framework underscores the efficiency of the brain's processing capabilities. By focusing on prediction errors and updating models accordingly, the cortex can allocate resources effectively, prioritizing novel or unexpected information. 3. Flexibility and adaptability. The brain's ability to continuously update its mental models ensures that our perception and behaviors remain adaptive to changing environments. This flexibility is crucial for learning, problem solving, and navigating complex social and physical landscapes. Potential applications. The insights gained from understanding the cortex model building capabilities have several potential applications: clinical psychology and neuroscience. Knowledge of how the cortex integrates perception and memory can inform therapeutic approaches for visual associative agnosia, amnesia, and other cognitive impairments. Target interventions could strengthen these neuronal connections and improve cognitive functions. Artificial intelligence and machine learning. Predictive coding and mental model constructions principles can be applied to develop more sophisticated AI systems. By mimicking the brain's ability to generate and update predictions, AI could become more efficient and adaptable in processing information and making decisions. Education and learning strategies. Understanding how schemas and archetypes shape perception and learning can enhance educational methods. By aligning teaching strategies with the brain's natural processing mechanisms, educators can improve learning outcomes and foster deeper comprehension. Future directions. Several avenues for future research could further elucidate the cortex role in cognitive processes. Neuroimaging studies, I skip this. Cross-disciplinary approaches, I skip this as well. Exploration of archetypes. Further exploration of Jungian archetypes in the context of modern neuroscience could reveal how these innate structures influence cognitive processes. Research could investigate how archetypes are represented in the brain and their impact on perception and behavior. And in conclusion, exploring the cortex as a model builder and archetype maker provides a profound understanding of how the brain constructs and interprets our experiences. This paper aims to examine the theoretical foundations, neural mechanisms, empirical evidence, and implications of these cognitive processes, offering a comprehensive perspective on the intricate working of the cortex. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have time for discussion. We have 5 minutes for discussion, or we decide to move on. First, as Anna. Using the microphone is better.
Use the microphone, please.
Can you hear me now?
Very well.
So, João, thank you very much. By your paper, it's clear that you are convinced that the archetypes are phylogenetically encoded.
Yes, I'm
At the
convinced
same
of that.
time, you talk about the cortex being the organizer and the creator of these archetypal
In
codes.
relational activities.
Okay, so in other words, they're learned.
Yes,
They're not hardwired, they're learned.
are inherent in a new being. We inherit at birth. But once upon a time, they are created by from the bottom. Of course, they are not eternal.
Because as a non-Jungian, the archetypes are a wonderful construct, like everything else human. They're very useful
Yes,
to grasp certain experiences of human emotions,
yes.
but they're not hardwired
They are.
and not phylogenetically
The
well, we
Jungian
disagree.
perspective.
But I'm not a Jungian.
Yes, but Jungian perspective,
Yeah.
the real Jungian perspective, say to us exactly that. They are hardwired in our
Okay.
brain and
But-
are inherent in the newborn.
But they're not. In babies, there are very few instincts.
Sorry?
Babies are born with very few instincts that they would attach to a mother, could be a
Yes.
man. Maybe you think that's hardwired, but it's not, it's an instinct.
Yes, an instinct is something hardwired.
Right.
Archetype or instinct is almost the same word.
Oh, you think so?
Yes, Jung said that. I'm a Jungian.
No.
Okay.
It's a construct. But
Excuse me, we cannot discuss so deeply
Thank you.
in private.
Thank you.
The Guido, I don't.
Professor.
Or Marcello.
Almo.
Guido.
Sorry for
But I suppose Professor as first. Professor Branco.
Okay, I have not realized.
Thank you very much, Joan. Yeah?
Yes,
Exactly.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. I would like to say that as we are getting older and older, we are more and more interested in the memory.
Yeah.
Can you say how memory is coded in some simple words?
It's not easy to explain in simple words, but this kind of capability of understanding, I don't know if it's a specific memories. Archetypes are the capability to comprehend some patterns. But it seems to me that even memories, specific memories, can be encoded in that kind of realities, biological realities, that in specific moments they emerge to make us understand some kind of events. For instance, relational events, spiritual ones. When we realize some kind of things, we activate those ancient memories. For instance, the relation with a God. Jung said we activate the imago Dei. I don't know if exists a transcendental God, I don't know, but I know that centuries, millennia of experiences with that kind of mental reality are encoded inside of us. And in several moments, that kind of information are activated, and we realize the reality in that exactly sense, and in that exactly behavioral perspective. That kind of things, I suppose there are archetypal memories that we must grasp, even to develop, because archetypes are not fixed things, must be developed.
I don't think that you really need code biology to state that archetypes do exist. Mutation selection is sufficient. You would rather need code biology to state that at least certain archetypes are arbitrary. For instance, that different cultures have different archetypes. Do you have evidence for that?
I don't agree.
It's
There is a archetypal grounded that are universal, because we are members of some species. Of course, there are levels of archetype realities, like the instincts and emotions upon instincts and other things that our biology construct. But there are basic mental realities called archetypes that are universal. And of course, each culture refines that kind of connection with this past, because archetypes are only the memory of the behavioral ways that our ancestors connected with the world. Only that.
Other? Okay, I think that is very important.
I need a
Okay.
presentation. Well, thank you. And I hope this presentation also can respond to some questions that you were putting to João Carlos. So I will start, and I will try to be brief. I trained my presentation was 30 minutes, but I will try to do it briefly. Unfortunately, I will have to use my notes to ensure my English sounds as good as possible for you. Otherwise, this could be worse. Dear colleagues, first and foremost, I would like to highlight that we are witnessing a historic moment. It is here at the Accademia di Scienze e Lettere Giovanni Capellini that Marcello Barbieri has decided to pass on the legacy of his genius, the genius that managed to decode and synthesize what would later become known as code biology. He has decided to pass on this crown jewel not only to our esteemed Nicola, but to all of us who now have the arduous task of honoring his work. We are also making history because it is from this discipline that many others have been able to solve their epistemological problems and find meaning in their guidelines. But firstly, let me share a brief story. A few years ago, while preparing to educate my daughter, I revisited some children's tales and new Disney movies. I came across with a movie named Luca, which depicted a beautiful fishing village on Italian Riviera. My curiosity led me to research more about the movie, and I discovered that the village named Porto Rosso in the movie was a creative layering of the director to represent the 5 villages of Cinque Terre in one. I immediately added it to my bucket list, intending to visit before I die. Years later, here I am with a serious commitment, and I'm not alone. By a stroke of luck, the 2 biggest influences in the field of analytical psychology for me were to be here, and I'm of course talking about João Carlos Major and Eric Goodwin. Unfortunately, Goodwin is not here because of health issues, but today is continue a special day because we are celebrating an anniversary of my dear friend João Carlos, who I want to present with a chant after this lecture. Suddenly, everything made sense because in 2012, Andrew Samuels wrote to The Guardian that this could be the Jung century. He explained that we are now beginning to gather the conditions to understand Jung's work. Undoubtedly, this is happening because today Barbieri has also given us the right tools to connect this important notion in psychology with the cutting-edge disciplines of semiotics and biology. So, in this presentation, I will take a step forward in giving a contemporary makeup to the archetype theory of Carl Jung from the point of view of a psychobiological approach. Almost 1 century ago, Carl Jung postulated that human beings were not a blank slate, as in a paper sheet where cultures write everything that we going to turn into. That was the main differences between Jung and his contemporaries. Take, for example, his quote. To Freud, the unconscious was a product of a consciousness. I mean, it was a sort of storeroom where all the discarded things of consciousness were heaped and up and left. But to me, the unconscious then was already a matrix, a sort of a basis of consciousness, of a creative nature, namely capable of autonomous acts, autonomous intrusions into consciousness. In the other words, I took the existence of the unconscious for a real fact, for a real autonomous factor capable of independent actions. This is a really important point, since for Freud the unconscious were a sine qua non with experience, but for Jung the unconscious, as Major states, the unconscious, in my italics, is a phylogenetic structure filled out with ontogenetic development. Such a structure is made up of archetypical units which possess the dynamic property of seeking their own actualization, mental evolution, in the behavior through external and internal triggers, as they live out the human life cycle within the context of their environment. Jung refers to the work of Goethe, where Faust aptly says, "In the beginning was the deed." So Jung says deeds were never invented, they were done, Thoughts, on the other hand, are relatively late discovery of man. First, he was moved to the deeds by unconscious factors. It was only a long time afterwards that he began to reflect upon the causes that had moved him. And it took him a very long time indeed to arrive at the prosperous idea that he must have moved himself, his mind being unable to identify any other motivation forces than his own. So this brings us to this fantastic image of Malifer twins by Charles Adams. These are twins separated at birth who end up accidentally meeting each other. Interesting, as you can see, both are observed with an invention on their labs, waiting to be painted at the office. Did you notice that both inventions are identical also? For some, this cartoon might seem bizarre, but even during my graduation studies, I was familiar with the twin studies by Bouchard, D'Onofrio, Robert Blomin, and so many. These authors demonstrated how studies with identical and fraternal twins allowed us to understand that our tendencies, personality traits, and behaviors are a consequence of our genetic configuration. Look, for instance, to this slide. One of my favorite examples is from Jack and Oscar, that were two twin brothers educated separately. One grew up in a Nazi Catholic family in Germany, and the other was raised in a Jewish family in Trinidad. When both entered in a lab in Minnesota, they were dressed in dark blue shirts with epaulets. They liked to dip buttered bread in the coffee, wore rubber bands on their wrists, flushed the toilet before and after using it, and wanted to surprise people by sneezing in the crowded elevators to see everyone jump. It seems absurd, but now I will modulate your emotions by evoking some fear, or maybe surprise, or maybe boredom, if you already know this. There are several studies linking divorce to our genetic predispositions. So a recent adoption study in Sweden showed that the connection between parents and children divorce is genetically forged, not environmentally, as traditional postulated. In a sample of 20,000 adopted individuals, the probability of divorce was higher if the biological mother, who did not raise the individual, divorced later in the life than if the adopted parents who raised it then divorced. In the end, as a grandpa Freud used to say, the problem is always the mother. I'm not suggesting that everything is inherited and that our genetic makeup always determines our behavior. However, before we delve into the environmental factors, I would like to share with you a classical study. Well, I will pass the classic study, I'm sorry, and I will go into this relation. Is better in that way. So, Robert Sapolsky, it's apparent that we are not automatically the result of our genetic inheritance, as that will make us two identical, and we are very different from each other. And we are only similar because of the culture that influences us, of course. Anyway, Robert Sapolsky, in his latest book, Determined, demonstrates how much we are determined, curiously, just like the title of the book, by our genes, but also how genetic coding can be activated and deactivated depending on our context. Here is a quote from Sapolsky. What might gene-environment interactions look like? Suppose someone has a gene variant related to aggression, depending on the environment, that can result in an increased likelihood of street brawling or of playing chess aggressively. Or a gene related to risk-taking that, depending on the environment, will influence whether you rob a store or gamble on funding a startup, or a gene related to addiction that, depending on the environment, produces Brahim drinking too much scotch in his club, or someone desperately stealing to get money for heroin. Here, Sapolsky demonstrates how, despite our innate tendencies, their expression can be channeled differently in responding to environmental signals. But this needs to be clarified to not drag us again into the nurture versus nature narrative. Why this is relevant to archetype theory? So how is this related instead to archetype theory? In many ways, as far as I can see throughout my study, I discovered that archetypes are like any other life code, where other codes highly regulate their structural elements. But in this case, for representational archetypes to be activated, understanding these as the pattern of behavior or a typical symbolic expression and so on, a dance between regulatory archetypes and structural archetypes should start. For example, hormones like cortisol can bind to receptors, initiating a signal transduction cascade that alters gene expression throughout epigenetic modifications, thus influencing the genetic code activity. In the case of archetypes, their structural basis may reside in our genome, while hormonal and epigenetic factors are part of the regulatory archetypes. Archetypes function very similarly to the constructing of a house. We can imagine that there is a foundation from which the walls are erected and finally the roof is placed. Ultimately, our behavior would be just the decoration added to the house. However, some rules occur long before the house is built, such as governmental regulations, topographical considerations, economic reasons, and geographic factors, and so on. Like structures of a house, walls, floor, and roofs, there are structural archetypes. The conditions, location, and the design of the house will mostly be shaped by regulatory archetypes. A house is always a house, but the final result or the style of decoration will be the representational archetypes. So, structural archetypes are deeply embedded in our psychobiology, function as fundamental blueprints that guide our psychological experience and behaviors. These archetypes preserved in our genome provide a basic structure that shapes cognition, emotion, and behavior, just like in house construction. Various structures evolve over time. Our genome predisposes our neural codes, and now we perceive the world, creating an experiences of what we call neurognosis, how our brain perceives and reacts to the world with a species-specific behavior pattern. Excuse me, I forgot. Regulatory archetypes similar to municipal regulations imposed on construction are the hormonal and epigenetic codes that influence how the house can and should be built. They modulate the expression of structural archetypes based on environment and internal conditions, ensuring a flexible and adaptive response to various situations. And representational archetypes are the manifest content shaped and channeled by the structural and regulatory archetype stance. They represent the final form of the interactions between structural and regulatory archetypes, showing how we react archetypally similarly to a species. Let us translate this to some practical examples, for we be able to understand how archetypes emerge from this dynamic. In the 90s, the crime rate drastically reduced in the USA. For liberals, the explanation was a more prosperous economy, while conservatives attributed it to increased policing budgets. However, the most striking and accurate explanation came from John Dunhoe and Stephen Levitt. The authors analyzed the liberalization of the abortion laws and the decline in crime, demonstrating that the availability of abortion reduces crime among young adults 20 years later. This is controversial, but it makes sense because being born to a mother who preferred not to have the child is a strong predictor of a life of crime. The most fundamental thing a mother can provide is her child's happiness. When this happiness do not occur, the codes that encode maternal behavior may be compromised, and consequently, the coding schemes of the children may also be altered. Here, we are talking about the regulatory component via epigenetics. There are innate scripts that shape what we seek in the environment. For mammalian species, especially primates and rodents, turn-taking and maternal care are highly relevant. This was demonstrated in an exciting study by Harlow, where the importance of the touch and warmth was observed in a specific species of monkeys. Harlow raised infant rhesus monkeys with 2 artificial mothers, one made of chicken wire with a milk bottle and the other covered with terry cloth. Despite one surrogate providing food, the infant monkeys overwhelmingly preferred the comfort and security of the terry cloth mother. Harlow concluded that men cannot live by milk alone. Love is an emotion that does not require a bottle or spoon feed. So, Harlow's conclusion may oversimplify human needs, but in some ways is right. Nearly a century ago, Jung wrote about the implication of the positive and negative maternal archetype, noting that all cultures tend to regard the maternal archetype as a symbol of nurturing and care, or love, in Harlow's words. I'll show how this archetype is shaped by biological codes that guide its activation and expression, but I believe, as Goodwin, that the genome provides an essential blueprint for maternal behaviors. However, we cannot disregard that this predisposition is also influenced or in need by factors such as childbirth, where the mother body matures to release milk, altering internal, hormonal, and other codes. The process of motherhood also incorporates external cues, like baby signals, that affect these codes. Today, it is known that a smiling and affectionate baby who stimulates maternal vocalization increases the positivity to oxytocin levels in mothers, facilitating breastfeeding and reducing stress levels. On the other hand, a baby who is constantly crying and in an aversive medical environment can increase maternal stress levels, reducing oxytocin levels and consequently affecting the quality of the bond that is established between mother and the child. These examples show how archetypes are enacted in real time between environmental signals and the mother body response. Although not everything directly depends on the context, certain mothers may have specific genetic variants in the oxytocin gene that influence how they perceive motherhood. This is why I also describe the notion of enacting archetypes, as our predisposition can influence how we actively explore and encode and interpret the world, such as our bodily experiences. That brings us to one of the main points of this presentation. We can understand that the mother archetype is a dynamic behavior expression, and in the last slide, I presented this dynamic process through action or inaction. But what is the definition of inaction? Inaction is a theory of cognition that emphasizes that knowledge is created through active interactions between an organism and environment. Instead of viewing cognition as passive information processing, inaction highlights cognition as dynamic and emergent process. This is simply to understand since everything in life needs any relation to express its potential, such as the seed that needs the gardener water. But when I mean emergent process, I'm not postulating that archetype notion is a posteriori conceptualization of life. As Susan Oyama insightfully analyzed, this supposedly that issue of nature versus nurture will refuse to go away unless we learn to see organisms as environmental, as mutually unfolded and enfolded structures. Oyama said that form emerges in successive interactions, far from being imposed on matter by some agent. It is a function of reactivity of the matter at many hierarchical levels and of the responsiveness of those interactions to each other, because mutual selectivity, reactivity, and constraint occur only in actually process. This orchestrate the activity of different portions of DNA, making genetic and environmental influences interdependent as genes and gene products are environment to each other. The extra-organismal environment is made internal by psychological or biochemical assimilation. The internal state is externalized through the products and behavior that select and organize the surrounding world. But it's also important to note that inaction is a process dependent of embodiment. Embodiment refers to the theory and perspective that the mind and cognition are not separate from the body, but are deeply influenced and conditioned by our physical existence. In Mark Johnson's words, these capacities are rooted in structures of our biological embodiment and are lived and experienced within the domain of consensual action and cultural history. Meaning includes patterns of embodiment experience and conceptual structures of our sensibility, our mode of perceptions or orienting ourselves, and of interaction with other objects, events, and persons. And this helps us to highlight an important concept that I described recently is a process of enacting archetypes. This term captures the idea that archetypal patterns are activated through environmental interactions, influencing behaviors and psychological experiences. Archetypes serve as a structural and regulatory codes within the psyche that guide perception, behavior, and our modes of understanding. So I want to have the opportunity to honor this presentation to Anthony Stevens, a brilliant mind that unfortunately we lost almost a year ago. And Stevens teaches, Jung also suggests that the way an archetype matures and functions is affected by both personality or genes and experience. For example, although we have an archetype that inspires and guides us towards love and comfort in the arms of our mothers when we are infants, if these relationships do not work well, we can have a stunted mother archetype. Anthony Stevens refers to this as thwarted archetypal intent. In this case, as adults, we might spend many of our lives searching for the mother or the father figure, trying to find someone who will love and protect us like a parent. Or we can close down our need for care and love completely and shun close caring. Researchers studying these early relationships and what is called attachment behavior have found that children and adults can behave in several ways that can be open to love and care or anxious about losing the love of the others and need reassurance. Alternatively, they can avoid close relationships because they are frightened or contemptuous and dismissive of closeness. Interestingly, a study by Remo Fernandez and collaborators in 2021 highlighted the intergenerational transmission of epigenetic modifications. They explore how childhood maltreatment experienced by the mothers might affect the DNA methylation and gene expression of the oxytocin receptor in their infants. The researchers found that while childhood maltreatment did not affect overall gene expression of the oxytocin receptor methylation or gene expression in mother, it did cause differences in methylation at specific DNA sites between mothers who had experienced childhood maltreatment and those who had not. Additionally, certain genetic variations influenced these methylation patterns based on the level of childhood maltreatment. For infants, a positive correlation in gene expression of the oxytocin receptor methylation levels between mothers and newborn was found only if the mother had not experienced childhood maltreatment. This suggests that maternal childhood maltreatment can disrupt the intergenerational transmission of gene expression of the oxytocin receptor, DNA methylation, potentially affecting the child's social and emotional development. This is the last slide, and I do not have time to explain the principal organization of archetypes fully. Regardless, the study of Remo Fernandez and collaborators help us to conclude that archetypes are self-regulating and self-organizing structures within the psyche. They maintain psychological stability by providing consistent patterns of meaning and behaviors. This self-regulation, even negative experience, ensures individuals can navigate their environments with a coherent and sense of identity and purpose. Archetypes are dynamically organized psychological and behavior patterns in response to internal and external stimuli, like how genes respond to environment factors. But at the same time, archetypes are teleonomic, adapting and responding to environment conditions to meet functional needs. This aligns with the findings of Ramo Fernandez and collaborators, showing how early adverse experience can epigenetically influence gene expression, affecting social and emotional development. These findings illustrate how environmental information is integrated into genetic regulation, demonstrating the teleonomic nature of biological systems and archetypes. And is this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perfect time. Yes, Anna.
The elaboration on development. Sapolsky was my professor, so I feel very honored. However, I cannot let you misconstrue or misquote Freud.
Of course.
Yes, Freud did not. Your first image there, in his first theory, the topographical theory, the unconscious precedes consciousness, which is actually developed through learning. And in the second structural model, id, ego, superego, the id supersedes the development of the ego, which is learned through education and adaptation. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna, thank you. That was a good appointment, and also it's not my words. Actually, maybe Jung was not the best disciple. Yes. Yes, you are right. You are right. But I mean that actually was Jung words. So, yes. So maybe he was not the best student of Freud.
Other questions? Okay.
Some random mutation of memes and selection, you have instincts or archetypes.
Mhm.
Why do you need the arbitrariness? You don't need the arbitrariness of codes
Mhm.
in what you're doing,
Okay.
insofar I see.
Okay. Okay. We can talk about it later. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Candy?
We are streaming, we need a mic.
Did you say that you could do without archetypes? Guido, I mean in the question. Is that what you said? And did you have a response to that, or did you just?
No, right now, I don't possess the best
Okay,
response to
because what
that,
I'm
yeah.
wondering is, I too read all Sapolsky. I didn't know you had him as a professor, but he is I love this work. I love it. But all that, I mean, it's wonderful detail, but all it amounts to is that everything, including patterns of organization, including themes, including what's the, not memes, but the anyway, systems that for imposing. Of course, in self-organizing systems that are biological and that are constantly creating themselves in an environment are going to have patterns that are going to be more, in a stochastic sense, right? More probable than anything else. So when I see light bulb or light fixture in the United States, got two things there and a plug, three plug thing, I see faces. And mothers, of course, everybody's had experience of mothers since they were two cells organizing themselves within an environment and all. So are you just saying that archetypes cash out in processes that are physiological? I mean, I'm just asking what you're actually taking the architects.
Yes, I actually mean that because I take the notion of archetypes like organic memory information, that you can look to the study of Sessif, that is an epigeneticist, and I think that is from California University, and he made this brilliant study with the rodents where you have the first generation of rodents, and he put the female with the male to copulate to get the second generation, but before he, with behavioral conditioning, he made the male be afraid of a sound, because every time that that kind of signal exists, he put a shock, and he was interested if this maybe passed to the next generation, this thing. And what happened was that the second generation of the rats, when they mature, they never learn about this, but the organic memory was preserved, because when they were with these inputs, with this information, they react the same way with the fear. But it was not, how I could say, it was not sufficient for Sessif, so he tried other things. He learned to these rats to have fear, conditioning fear to other, where he conditioning the rats to react to the other like they were reacting to the shock, the siren. And the third generation of the rats preserve this alteration of organic information and show that when the rats mature, they respond with afraid to the other. What you could see was different information being processed between generations, but the sense was could be transmitted, you know. So I think that maybe this kind of evidence that we are achieving now could respond to that type of question. I don't know.
I think it's just a comment about the instinct. But if you ask what is the instinct and what are the mechanisms that at the basis of the so-called instinct, because simply say this is instinct is not enough.
Yes.
And I think, I'm sorry because I replied to Guido,
Yeah.
but I think that the instinct is simply a simplification of a code, innate codes that
Exactly.
are established in our genome. But my competence
I'm
is
with
very
I'm with
limited,
you on that.
not
I'm with
unlimited.
you on that.
Limited. Sorry.
I'm with you on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and see you at, as usual, at 3 p.m.
I just have a request. It's a little chant to my dear friend João. He deserves us to chant his happy birthday. So.
Yeah. Congratulations for your birthday. How? 50. Not 15.
No, 15 in my mind.
It's a part that I understand. I sent you my paper about the final scale and equal theory.
So amazing. Your ideas.
Because our ideas based on a more general reasoning about evolution.
Yeah.
It's the same story, instinct. What is it's just
Yes.
a word.
Yes. A generalization. Yes.
It's generally, yes. Nothing against the instinct. Of course. Forbidden passage in our neural mechanism. Maybe that there is open a door and you look at memory data before to make any decision. Yes. But I don't know if there is a neurological fundamental. Grazie a te. I understand what I mean. But apart I have no competence to read your book. Okay, please. Yes. Send you an email. It would be interesting to write something about his invention. Yes. Because my idea are not based on theories, but on natural evidences.
Yes. Completely natural evidences. Confirmed in any way right now.
Why one bird selects one place? And I need a reply to this question. Not simply how, because they are evident. It's a world evident. It's not a